What is the best and most effective way for a developer to push back on a feature or requirement?
It depends on what they're pushing back on, right? So there's many things related to a feature. Like if it's generally like why a feature is being prioritized, I think it's really important to speak and push back around the why. So as a part of a product manager, their biggest role is to help people understand the what and the why of what they're doing. And so if a development team doesn't understand the why, I think they have every reason to push back and keep going back to that why. To be like, hey, I don't even understand in general why we're doing this. Is to really focus on the why and just ask those questions. It's like, what data do we have? Like, help me understand how this impacts the customer experience. How do we know? How can we be confident that this is what we need to do? If it has to do with more of like a feature and say, for example, like the design of it, I think that's really when it's like a PM and user experience team partnership and having your user experience team member there. I think it's really important for them to speak to their designs and not necessarily a product manager. I think too often product managers are speaking to a design which it isn't their work. And I think a part of it is, yeah, a product manager is finalizing it, but a user experience design team member should be able to speak to their work and talk about why they did things, UX principles, everything like that. But it all goes back to the why. It's okay to question it as long as you're being very specific in why you're questioning it. I think it's really important.
I think probably in my head, the number one reason you question it is the crazy people in the product team have drawn up this amazing feature that does all these things. And as the engineer, I sit down, I start making my beeps and my boops. And after a while, I go, oh my God, this is a lot more complicated than I thought it was. And I got to come crawling back to you. I probably estimated that it's going to be 2 weeks. And I got to come to your door and knock on it and say, well, Lori, it's probably not going to be 2 weeks. So we got to change this. I assume this is a common thing that happens to you?
Yeah, it's funny because in my history as a product manager, one thing I actually have like a few sticky notes on my computer that like remind me to do certain things. So I mentioned technical risks earlier, and it's like when I'm in conversation with specific people. So say, for example, a developer, like I'm always asking myself, like, what new technical risks are there? And how has the effort changed since we last talked? Because there's so many things that can be discovered along the way. And so it's really important to check in and make sure that like, because you're right, like you just mentioned, you're like, I don't want to tell Lori this. And so I think sometimes you, again, have to create that environment to be like, hey, I'm asking you for this. And like, it is what it is, but we just got to know, and then we'll pivot accordingly. But I think if you don't ask those questions along the way, you could have 4 months go by, and then all of a sudden a 2 week effort you find out has turned into like a quarter effort. And you're like, well, this doesn't fit on the roadmap anymore. So we'll have to make those decisions. So ask early and often.
And so when you say often, how early or how often are you checking in with the dev? Are you saying, weekly meetings? Are you coming every day by their side of their desk and going, hey, how's it going? Or like, what's your process?
Well, I'm living a remote lifestyle, or else I may actually creep up to somebody's desk and ask the question more than weekly. But typically it's weekly. Looking at the project plan in general, because there's so many things that factor into the project plan, how current work is doing, how I say initiatives, but like, roadmap and items that we're working on, those things that are in research and design, like how those things are coming along. And so asking the question from all sense, but really I'd say weekly, and coming back to that question of how's this shaping out? Is there any more scope that has creeped in? Why? And just understanding those things. I think daily might be a little much, maybe for the things that are being worked on in the sprint, but if you're working on R&D on something that's, for the next quarter, I think weekly is pretty sufficient.
Well, and the other question I have for you is how solid are things set? Like, are they rocks? And the reason I ask that is because I've been working and pairing up with people on projects, and they go, we have to have it this way. And you go, well, I don't know that we have to have it this way. And they're like, well, the product team said we have to have it this way. And you go, well, I think they're regular people. We can go talk to them, right? And kind of figure out that why, right? And so have you had that where people are afraid to come talk to you about things because they think like you're going to yell at them, or that maybe you're their boss on this project or something like that?
Yeah, it's funny. And it's like, I don't know if there's just certain people that are maybe scarred by their previous experience, because I always say this, like, I'm always sitting there trying to foster this environment that's like, give me all of your insights, because by no reason, like, means am I the smartest person in the room. And I think it goes back to that imposter syndrome that people are like, well, there's this person and they put it on the roadmap so they know everything. And it's like, do we know a good amount about it? Like, sure. But at the same time, like, so many people are customer facing and or talking to people that are customer facing that have their own data points or a different perspective. And so it's really important for people to come and just ask those questions, like, making sure that they understand the why and or bringing new data to the table. But again, it goes back to creating an environment to encourage people to have questions and bring them to the table. Because if you end a meeting and you're not like, hey, does anyone have any questions? Do you have any concerns? This is our chance to be candid. Like, please speak up. Then nobody will ever do it.